My name's James. I'm 63 years old. And if you told me last year that I'd be the one storming into my daughter's house on Christmas morning, yelling at a room full of my own family, I would have laughed in your face. I've always been the calm one, the peacemaker, the go along to get along kind of guy. I worked 35 years as an electrician, never missed a birthday, never forgot an anniversary, and did everything I could to be a steady presence for my kids and grandkids. But this past Christmas morning, something in me snapped. It had snowed the night before, one of those postcard-perfect white Christmases you always see in movies. I got up early, made coffee, and wrapped the last present I had for my granddaughter Lily, a hand-carved music box I'd spent weeks working on in my garage. It played her favorite lullaby, and I couldn't wait to see her face when she opened it. I drove across town humming to myself, thinking about how happy everyone would be. But when I pulled into my daughter Megan's driveway, the scene in front of me didn't match the warm family Christmas I'd pictured. Lily was sitting on the front porch steps, in the snow, wearing her little red coat and sparkly boots. She was hugging her knees and sobbing so hard her shoulders shook. I jumped out of the car and ran to her. "Sweetheart, what are you doing out here? You'll freeze." She just buried her face into my chest and whispered, "Mom said I can't come in until they finish opening gifts." I froze. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. Megan had always been difficult, but keeping her own daughter outside on Christmas morning? That was a new low. I could hear the sound of laughter and paper ripping from inside the house. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of the living room, my son-in-law passing out gifts, my other grandkids tearing into boxes, Megan smiling with a mug of cocoa in hand. It looked like something off a Christmas card, except for the fact that Lily, the youngest of the bunch, was outside shivering. My first instinct was to knock calmly and ask what was going on. But as I stood there holding Lily, feeling her tiny hands freezing through her mittens, something inside me hardened. I opened the door without knocking. The warmth hit me first, then the smell of cinnamon rolls and coffee. Everyone's heads turned toward me, startled. Megan's smile vanished. "Dad, what are you?" she started, but I cut her off. "Are you proud of yourselves?" I asked, my voice louder than I'd intended. The room went silent. My son-in-law's jaw tightened. My other grandkids stared, wide-eyed, their toys momentarily forgotten. Megan tried to laugh it off. "Dad, you're overreacting." Lily was just, but Lily's sobbing broke through the silence, making whatever excuse Megan was about to offer sound hollow. I set Lily down on the couch and wrapped her in a blanket that was draped over the armrest. "She's been outside in the snow," I said, my voice quieter now, but shaking with anger, "while you all sat here opening presents." Megan rolled her eyes. She was throwing a tantrum. I told her she could come back when she calmed down. I could feel my blood pressure rising. "Lily? A tantrum? She's the most gentle, soft-spoken kid I've ever known." I turned to my son-in-law. "And you thought this was okay?" He just shrugged and said, "We're trying to teach her boundaries." Boundaries. That word rattled around in my head like a loose screw. When I was a kid, boundaries meant you didn't talk back to your parents. When I raised Megan and her brother, it meant giving them a safe home and teaching them right from wrong. It did not mean punishing a 6-year-old by making her sit outside alone on Christmas morning. I could feel years of swallowed frustration bubbling up. Every time Megan had made a cutting remark about how I raised her, every time she rolled her eyes when I gave Lily an extra cookie or stayed too long at family dinner. I had kept quiet for years to keep the peace. But not today. Boundaries, I repeated, my voice low but firm. "Do you think this is teaching her anything except that her family doesn't want her around?" Megan's face flushed. "Dad, don't make a scene. It's Christmas." That almost made me laugh. A scene? Lily sitting outside in the cold wasn't a scene? I glanced around the room. No one said a word. No one stood up for Lily. They just stared, waiting for me to back down. But I didn't. I sat on the couch next to Lily and pulled the music box out of my coat pocket. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I said softly, winding it up. The gentle tune filled the room, clashing with the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. I could see Megan's jaw clench. "You're undermining us," she said sharply. I didn't answer. Instead, I focused on Lily's face as the music box played. Her tears slowed, and for a moment, she smiled. That smile was the only thing that kept me from shouting right then and there. But deep down, something had shifted in me. This wasn't just about one morning. This was about years of Megan's behavior, years of biting my tongue while she grew more entitled, more dismissive, more cruel, not just to me, but now to her own daughter. I sat there in silence until the song ended, then put the music box on the coffee table. The room stayed tense, no one moving, no one speaking. Megan finally broke the silence. "If you're going to make us all uncomfortable, maybe you should go." And that was the moment I knew this wasn't going to be fixed with one confrontation. Something much bigger was brewing. I stood up, kissed Lily on the forehead, and walked out without another word. But as I drove home through the snow, I realized I couldn't just let this go. Not this time. Not when Lily was the one paying the price. The drive home that morning felt longer than usual, even though it was only 15 minutes. Snow clung to the windshield in thick sheets, and I had to fight to keep my hands from shaking on the steering wheel. I wasn't just angry, I was hurt. Hurt in a way I hadn't felt since Megan was a teenager and told me I was a boring dad who didn't understand anything. That sting had faded over time, but this one was fresh, raw, and sitting heavy in my chest. When I got home, the house felt unusually quiet. My wife passed a glance at me from the kitchen table, her coffee steaming. "You're back early," she said gently, as if she could sense the storm brewing inside me. I told her everything. How Lily had been sitting outside, how Megan had looked me in the eye and told me I was making a scene. My wife sighed, and that sigh told me more than words could. "She's been distant for a while," she admitted. "Maybe we should just let them handle things their way." But I couldn't. I tried, though. For a few weeks, I stayed quiet. I didn't call Megan except to check on Lily. Most of those calls went to voicemail, and when I did get through, Megan sounded distracted, impatient. "Dad, we're busy," she'd say, her voice clipped. "Lily's fine." But Lily wasn't fine. I could hear it in her voice on the rare time she got to talk to me. Soft, hesitant, like she didn't want anyone to hear her. One afternoon in January, I dropped by unannounced again, just to bring Lily a set of paints I'd picked up for her. I stood at the door with the bag in my hand and heard Megan before she even opened it. "Dad, you can't just show up like this. We have rules." I asked if I could at least say hi to Lily. She hesitated before finally letting me in. Lily was sitting on the floor in the living room, coloring quietly while her older cousins played a video game on the big TV. When she saw me, her face lit up and then immediately dimmed when Megan said, "Don't get too excited. Grandpa can't stay long." I stayed just long enough to hand her the paints and watch her eyes sparkle. As I left, I heard Megan mutter under her breath, "Great, now she's going to make a mess with those." That was the moment I realized something was off. It wasn't just strict parenting. It was something colder, calculated. In February, it got worse. My wife and I had invited the whole family over for Sunday dinner, like we'd done for decades. Everyone came, but the atmosphere felt strained. Megan spent most of the night scrolling on her phone, only half listening when Lily tried to tell her about school. At one point, Lily spilled a glass of water by accident. It wasn't much, just a little puddle on the table, but Megan's reaction was explosive. "Lily, go sit in the other room until we finish eating." I couldn't help myself. "Megan, it was an accident. She's 6. She needs to learn consequences." Megan snapped, not even looking at me. Something about the way Lily quietly stood up and shuffled into the next room with her head down made my chest ache. After dinner, I found her sitting on the couch, tracing shapes on her knees with her finger. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I asked. She nodded, but her eyes were glassy. "Mom says I ruined dinner," she whispered. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my recliner replaying the entire evening over and over again, wondering where I had gone wrong as a father. Megan wasn't raised this way. She wasn't raised to be cruel or to treat her child like an inconvenience. By March, the distance between us had widened into a canyon. Megan stopped answering my calls altogether. The only updates I got about Lily came from social media posts. Pictures of family outings where Lily was either absent or sitting off to the side, looking small and forgotten. I sent Megan a message asking if everything was all right. The reply came hours later, just 3 words: "We're doing fine." It wasn't until Easter that things came to a head again. My wife and I had organized an egg hunt in the backyard for all the grandkids. The others squealed with excitement, darting across the grass, but Lily hung back near the porch steps, looking like she wanted to disappear. When I crouched down next to her and asked why she wasn't playing, she said quietly, "Mom told me not to get dirty this time." That did it. I stood up and found Megan near the picnic table. "She's a kid," I said firmly. She should be allowed to run around and play like the others. Megan barely looked up from her phone. Dad, we're trying to teach her discipline. You always undermine us. Discipline? I asked. Or control? Her head snapped up at that, eyes narrowing. You don't get to tell me how to raise my child. Maybe if you had done a better job raising me, I wouldn't have to work so hard correcting your mistakes. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All the years of putting her through school, buying her first car, helping her through her divorce, all of it was dismissed in one cruel sentence. I walked away before I said something I couldn't take back, but my hands were trembling. Later that night, I found Lily sitting alone in the den, playing quietly with a stuffed bunny. I sat next to her and asked, "Do you like living here, sweetheart?" She hesitated before nodding. "I like my room," she said softly. Then, after a pause, she added, "But I like when I'm at your house better. You don't get mad at me." My heart broke. I knew then that this wasn't just a rough patch. This was a pattern, one that was going to hurt Lily more and more as she grew older. And as much as I wanted to believe Megan would come around on her own, I was starting to see that she wouldn't. Not without something forcing her to take a long, hard look at herself. By May, Megan had cut off nearly all visits. When I dropped by with a birthday card for Lily, I was told through the screen door that she was busy. I left the card in the mailbox, feeling like a stranger outside my own daughter's home. But I wasn't just sitting around doing nothing. Quietly, I started keeping notes, dates, times, what I saw, what I heard. Not because I wanted to get Megan in trouble, but because I needed to understand what was happening. I needed a clear picture of just how bad it had gotten. And the more I wrote down, the clearer it became. This wasn't just favoritism or strict parenting. This was isolation. This was emotional neglect. And Lily deserved better. One evening in June, I was sitting on the porch with my wife, the sun setting behind us, when I said the words out loud for the first time. "I think we need to do something." She looked at me carefully. "What kind of something?" "The kind that makes sure Lily doesn't spend next Christmas sitting outside in the snow." My wife didn't answer right away, but after a long moment, she nodded slowly. That was the night I started to make a plan. July rolled in hot that year, the kind of sticky summer where the air feels like wet cloth on your skin. I hadn't seen Lily in over a month, and the silence was starting to gnaw at me. I tried everything: calls, texts, even sending small packages with books and art supplies. Most of it went unacknowledged. It wasn't just painful, it was infuriating. Then one Thursday evening, I got a call from a neighbor who lived down the street from Megan. "James," she said cautiously, "I don't mean to get in the middle of anything, but I saw Lily sitting on your daughter's porch for almost an hour today. It was 90 degrees out, and she looked upset." I was about to go ask if she was okay, but then Megan came out and brought her inside. It just didn't seem right. That call lit a fire under me. I drove over the next morning under the pretense of dropping off some fresh peaches from our garden. When I pulled up, I could hear shouting through the open kitchen window. Megan's voice, sharp and clipped. "You are not going to that sleepover, do you hear me? You don't deserve to go after the way you behaved yesterday." A smaller voice, Lily's, answered, trembling. "But it wasn't my fault. I just wanted to play." "Enough," Megan snapped. "Go to your room." I stood frozen by the car, my hand still on the door handle. Something inside me twisted. It wasn't unusual for parents to ground their kids, sure, but there was something in Megan's tone, hard, dismissive, almost cruel, that made my stomach turn. When I knocked, Megan opened the door and immediately frowned. "Dad, now's not a good time." "I just came to drop these off," I said, holding out the bag of peaches. I glanced past her shoulder, hoping to see Lily. "She's busy," Megan said curtly, taking the bag and moving to shut the door. "Busy doing what?" I asked before I could stop myself. "That's none of your business," she shot back. "You need to respect how we parent." Parent. The word felt hollow. I left without saying more, but my chest was tight the entire drive home. A week later, I got my answer to what had been going on, and it was worse than anything I'd imagined. It was a Sunday afternoon when my wife got a call from Megan, not me. Megan sounded almost cheerful. "Hey Mom, just letting you know we're having a little get-together for Lily this weekend. We're calling it a reset party." "Eh, what?" my wife asked, confused. Megan laughed. "It's like a way to reward the other kids and show Lily how to behave better. She's been acting out. We want her to see what happens when she doesn't listen." I was standing across the room, listening. Every word made my jaw clench tighter. rewarding the other kids to show Lily how to behave. That wasn't parenting. That was humiliation dressed up as discipline. Can we come? My wife asked cautiously. There was a pause, then Megan said, actually, no. We think it'll be more effective if it's just us and the cousins. Too many people around might make her think she can hide behind someone. That was it. That was the moment the line was crossed. They weren't just excluding me. They were isolating Lily intentionally, turning a family gathering into a punishment ritual. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the girl who used to run across my lawn barefoot, giggling, asking me to push her on the swing one more time before dinner. That little girl was being treated like a problem to be fixed instead of a child who needed love. The party was set for Saturday. I didn't tell Megan I was coming. I just showed up. When I pulled up, there were balloons on the mailbox and cars lined along the curb. I could hear music and laughter from the backyard. Through the fence, I saw the cousins running around with water guns, shrieking with joy. In the middle of it all, there was a table stacked with presents and cupcakes. But Lily wasn't there. I walked around to the side gate and peeked through the slats. There she was, sitting on the steps by the garage, away from the others, her little dress damp with sweat and dirt. There was a paper plate on the step next to her with a single cookie on it, untouched. That was all I needed to see. I went through the gate without knocking this time. The laughter faded as I stepped into the yard. Megan's face turned pale. Dad, you can't just. Where's Lily's seat at the table? I asked, my voice calm but carrying across the yard. She doesn't have one, Megan said, her tone defensive. This is for the other kids. She's learning. Learning what? I interrupted, my voice rising despite myself. Learning that her family thinks she's unworthy? Learning that she has to sit apart like she doesn't exist. The other adults shifted uncomfortably. My son-in-law stood up. James, you're out of line. This is our house, and we will handle our child the way we see fit. I took a step closer, my hands shaking but my voice steady now. Your child is sitting alone on the ground while the rest of you celebrate. That's not discipline. That's cruelty. Lily looked up at me with wide eyes. Grandpa, she whispered, and that broke me. I picked her up, right there in front of everyone, and said, you're coming with me. Megan stepped forward, blocking my path. If you take her, don't bother coming back. Her words hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop. I carried Lily out through the gate, put her in my truck, and drove away while Megan shouted after me. When we got to my house, I gave Lily a bath, made her some macaroni and cheese, and let her pick a movie. She fell asleep on the couch halfway through. I just sat there staring at her, realizing how small she looked under the blanket. My phone buzzed around 9 that night. It was a string of angry texts from Megan. You had no right. You undermined us again. You're never seeing her without supervision again. And then the one that stopped me cold. If you think you can raise her better, go ahead and try. But you'll never win. She's our kid. That last line was the one that did it. It was no longer just about me being excluded. It was about Lily's entire future. I sat there in the quiet, the only sound the soft breathing of my sleeping granddaughter, and made a silent promise. I wasn't going to let this continue. Whatever it took, whatever lines I had to cross, I was going to make sure Lily never felt this small again. And that was the night the plan that had only been half-formed in my mind became something real, something sharp and deliberate. The next morning, the storm hit. Not the weather, the fallout. I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Missed calls, voicemails, messages. Megan, my son-in-law, even a couple of my extended relatives. The first voicemail was Megan's voice, shaking with fury. You had no right to humiliate us like that in front of everyone. Bring Lily back now, or we'll call the police. I didn't answer. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee as it went cold. Lily was still asleep on the couch, her small frame curled up under a blanket, holding the stuffed bunny I dug out of the closet for her the night before. She looked peaceful, more peaceful than I'd seen her in months. By mid-morning, Megan showed up at my door. She didn't knock. She pounded. My wife answered before I could stop her. Where is she? Megan demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She's resting, my wife said evenly. This is kidnapping, Megan snapped. You think you can just swoop in and take her whenever you feel like it? I stepped into the doorway then, my heart pounding. I took her because you left her sitting alone in the heat while you threw a party around her. I said, my voice calm but hard. That was discipline, Megan shot back. You made a scene. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. And now you're trying to turn her against us. The argument escalated fast. My wife tried to mediate, but neither of us was in the mood to compromise. Eventually, Megan grabbed Lily's backpack and said, "We're leaving. And from now on, if you want to see her, it'll be on our terms." Lily woke up as Megan started ushering her out the door. "Grandpa?" she asked, her voice small. I knelt down and hugged her tight. "I'll see you soon, sweetheart," I whispered, though I had no idea if that was true. She clung to my neck for a second longer before Megan pulled her away and walked her to the car. The house felt emptier than it had in years after they left. That night, my phone lit up again, this time with messages from other family members. My sister-in-law wrote, "James, I know you meant well, but you went too far. You should apologize." My own son called to say Megan had been crying all day. "You need to make this right, Dad," he said. "She says you're trying to make her look like a bad mom." That hit hard. The last thing I wanted was to turn this into a family war, but that's exactly what it was becoming. Days passed. Megan stopped answering my calls altogether. When I finally drove by just to check in, I saw Lily's bike leaning against the side of the house, its tires flat and covered in dust. I hadn't seen her ride it since spring. At church the next Sunday, I overheard someone whispering about family drama. I knew Megan had been talking. The looks I got from a few people said enough. Somehow, I had gone from the quiet, dependable grandfather to the meddling troublemaker. By August, the silence was unbearable. I would wake up in the middle of the night thinking I heard Lily's footsteps in the hall, only to find the house quiet. I kept her drawings on the fridge, her favorite blanket folded neatly on the couch, waiting for the next time she'd come over, though deep down, I was starting to wonder if that next time would ever come. The worst was Lily's birthday. I mailed her a present, a set of watercolor paints and a card, a week early to make sure it got there. On the day of her birthday, I got no call, no text, no photo of her opening it. I found out later through a neighbor's Facebook post that Megan had thrown a birthday party and invited everyone except me and my wife. That night, I sat in the garage, staring at the half-finished toy chest I'd been building for Lily. My hands itched to keep working, but what was the point? She might never even see it. It was then that the loneliness shifted into something else, clarity. I couldn't fix this by asking nicely. I couldn't fix it by keeping quiet and hoping Megan would come around. If anything, my silence had allowed things to get this bad. I started small. I called a lawyer friend of mine under the guise of asking about a hypothetical situation. He didn't judge. He just explained what grandparents' rights looked like in our state and what kind of documentation would help if things escalated. I started keeping a folder in my desk drawer, notes, photos, timestamps, even copies of the texts Megan had sent me after the reset party. Then I started talking quietly to people who had been there, family friends, neighbors. I didn't tell them everything, just asked if they'd seen how Megan had been treating Lily lately. More than one of them nodded somberly and admitted they'd noticed something was off, but didn't feel it was their place to say anything. Each conversation felt like a small step forward, like laying bricks for something bigger. At the same time, I tried to be careful not to push Megan further away. I sent polite messages, "Thinking of you. Hope Lily's having a good day. We'd love to have you both for dinner." Most of them went unanswered, but a few times Megan would reply with short, clipped responses. In September, I got a brief visit with Lily. Just an hour, supervised, but it was enough. She was quieter than usual, like she was afraid to say too much. When I asked how school was, she shrugged. "It's okay. Do you still paint?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She nodded slowly. "When Mom lets me." Those 4 words sank like a stone in my chest. When Mom lets me. After that visit, I went back to the garage and finished the toy chest. I sanded it until it was smooth, painted it her favorite color, and added a lock, not to keep her out, but so she'd have a place to keep things safe. I didn't give it to her yet. I just set it in the corner and covered it with a tarp. Something told me the right time hadn't come yet. By October, I had stopped trying to win Megan over with words. Instead, I focused on getting my own life in order, my finances, my will, my house. I wanted everything solid, unshakable, because I knew that when the time came to act, I couldn't afford to hesitate. And as the leaves turned and the air cooled, a single thought kept me going. This Christmas would not be like the last one. One way or another, I was going to make sure of that. October bled into November, and with the cold came clarity. For months, I had been reacting to everything. Megan's calls, her accusations, her rules. I'd been playing defense. But now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally on my feet. It started with small things. I got back into a routine. I'd wake up early, make coffee, and walk through the neighborhood before sunrise. At first, it was just to clear my head, but soon the habit became something I looked forward to. That quiet hour where the streets were empty and the air felt sharp and clean. I lost a few pounds, got my blood pressure back under control, and for the first time in years, I felt steady. My wife noticed the change too. "You seem lighter," she said one morning, passing me my mug of coffee. Not happier, exactly, but stronger. I smiled at that. Stronger. That was exactly the word for it. By mid-November, I was no longer just keeping notes about Megan's behavior. I was organizing them. I bought a sturdy leather binder and started logging everything in chronological order. Dates, times, what I saw, what neighbors reported to me, screenshots of texts. It wasn't out of spite. It was preparation. I also began speaking quietly to people who mattered, not just friends, but people whose voices carried weight. The pastor from our church, who had noticed Lily's absence from Sunday school. A retired teacher who lived on Megan Street and had seen Lily spending more and more time alone. Even Megan's old friend, who admitted in confidence that she had stopped visiting because the atmosphere in the house had become so tense. Each person I spoke to seemed relieved that someone else was noticing what they had quietly worried about. They didn't all agree with my approach, but most offered to help if I ever needed it, to write statements, to speak up. That gave me a kind of courage I hadn't felt in months. Meanwhile, my relationship with my wife deepened. We'd been married for over 30 years, but the past year had tested us in ways neither of us expected. There had been nights where we barely spoke, each of us grieving in our own way. But now, we started spending evenings together in the garage, me working on small projects while she read or painted beside me. The quiet companionship was a balm I didn't know I needed. One chilly Saturday morning, I took a trip out to the hardware store and bought a new swing set. It wasn't a small purchase, but I told myself it was worth it. I spent the entire weekend assembling it in the backyard, making sure every bolt was tight, every beam level. When I was done, I stood back and looked at it. A bright, sturdy swing set with 2 swings, a slide, and a small platform. It looked a little ridiculous sitting empty in the yard, but I didn't care. "This is for when she comes back," I told my wife. "You really believe she will?" she asked gently. "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "And when she does, I want her to know this house is still hers too." That night, I sat in the garage staring at the toy chest under the tarp. It was finished now, smooth and shining in the soft light. I ran my hand over the lid and imagined Lily filling it with her favorite books, her paints, her little treasures. That image kept me going. December crept closer, and with it came an unexpected opportunity. I got a call from a local youth program I'd donated to a few years back. They were running a winter art program for kids and needed volunteers. I hesitated at first. Would Megan see this as me overstepping? But then I thought about Lily, how much she had loved painting when she was allowed to do it. I signed up. The first Saturday I went, I felt a little out of place, a 63-year-old man surrounded by kids with paint-smeared hands. But within an hour, I was laughing with them, helping them mix colors, showing them how to sand wooden frames. It was healing in a way I hadn't expected. And every time I handed a finished project back to a smiling child, I thought of Lily. Meanwhile, I kept trying to maintain a thread of contact with her. I sent small letters, not texts, letters, with funny drawings in the margins and little stories about the birds that visited our feeder. Sometimes I'd get a letter back, just a few lines in her uneven handwriting. "I miss you." I drew a picture of the swing set. Those letters were gold to me. I kept them all in the binder, tucked carefully in plastic sleeves. On the legal side, I had another meeting with my lawyer friend. This time it wasn't hypothetical. I laid everything out: the notes, the letters, the witness accounts. He listened carefully, nodding as I spoke. When I finished, he said, "You have a strong case if this ever goes to court, but you need to be patient and strategic. Don't force this before you're ready." Patience. That had never been my strong suit, but I understood what he meant. I didn't want to go to war unprepared. Financially, I got my house appraised and refinanced, freeing up some cash. Not because I planned to spend it recklessly, but because I wanted to be ready for legal fees, for therapy sessions if Lily needed them, for anything that would give her a chance at a better environment. And slowly, I began to feel like I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building something, a foundation. Christmas lights began appearing on houses in the neighborhood, and with them came the memory of last Christmas. The image of Lily sitting on the porch steps, shivering in her red coat, was burned into my mind. But this year, I felt different. Last year, I had been blindsided, hurt, helpless. This year, I was steady. I had a plan. One evening, as I plugged in the lights on our own house, my wife came to stand beside me. "You know," she said quietly, "whatever happens this Christmas, you're ready." I nodded, watching the lights glow warm in the cold evening. "This time," I said, "we do it on our terms." Inside, the binder sat waiting on the kitchen table, the letters tucked neatly inside. The swing set stood ready in the yard. The toy chest gleamed in the garage. All the pieces were in place. And for the first time in a long time, I found myself smiling. Because I knew, deep down, that the day was coming when I would stop just preparing and finally act. December was colder than I expected that year, a kind of sharp, biting cold that made every breath feel like it cut your lungs. I woke up each morning to find frost crawling across the windows, the yard frozen under a glittering crust. It reminded me constantly that Christmas was near, and with it came the memory of that awful morning a year ago. But unlike last year, I wasn't walking into this one blind. The first crack in Megan's perfect facade came in early December. A friend of mine, Carl, who happened to work at Lily's elementary school, called me one evening. His voice was careful, but there was an edge to it. "James, I thought you should know. Lily's teacher requested a conference with Megan last week. She's been quiet in class, not participating, and they're concerned she's withdrawing." I wasn't supposed to say anything, but, well, I thought you'd want to know. That information was like a piece of a puzzle sliding into place. I thanked him and hung up, my mind already turning. If the school was noticing something, that meant there were records, documented concerns. And that could be crucial if things ever turn legal. The next day, I called the school and asked to speak with the guidance counselor. I introduced myself as Lily's grandfather and explained that I was concerned about her well-being. The counselor was cautious, understandably, but after a long pause, she said, "Mr. Hayes, I can't share everything without parental consent, but I can tell you that we have made note of some behavioral changes and have encouraged her parents to consider counseling." Counseling. That was significant. It meant someone outside the family had seen what I'd been seeing all year. That night, I added a new section to my binder, school reports. I wrote down everything I'd just learned and left space for future updates. Meanwhile, I kept up my work with the youth art program. It had become more than just a distraction. It was a way to remind myself of what kids needed: patience, encouragement, a safe space to make mistakes. One Saturday afternoon, while helping a boy frame his painting, I felt my phone buzz. It was a text from Megan. "Are you doing something with Lily for Christmas?" I stared at the screen, my heart thudding. It was the first message I'd gotten from her in weeks that wasn't curt or angry. "Yes," I typed back. "We'd like to see her. Maybe Christmas Eve dinner." Hours passed before she replied. "Maybe. We'll let you know." It wasn't much, but it was enough to tell me she was starting to let her guard down, if only slightly. Then came the moment that turned everything from preparation to action. It was the second weekend of December. I stopped by the hardware store for some last-minute supplies when I spotted Megan's car in the parking lot of the cafe next door. Through the window, I saw her sitting with a woman I didn't recognize, gesturing animatedly. Normally, I wouldn't have cared, but then I saw Lily sitting alone at a corner table, quietly drawing on a napkin while Megan talked. Something about the scene gnawed at me. I waited until Megan got up to go to the counter, then slipped into the cafe and crouched next to Lily. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly. Her face lit up. "Grandpa, are you okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Mom said I have to sit here while she talks. I'm not allowed to order anything." My stomach twisted. I glanced toward the counter. Megan was still waiting in line, then quickly slid a $5 bill across the table. "Why don't you get yourself a cookie? Don't tell Mom I gave it to you." Her smile widened, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flash of the carefree girl I remembered. When Megan came back and saw me, her expression darkened immediately. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I was just saying hello," I said evenly, "and making sure Lily didn't sit here hungry." Her jaw tightened. "We're leaving." As she ushered Lily out, I caught a glimpse of the papers Megan had left on the table. My heart stopped when I realized what I was looking at: a printed schedule with Lily's name on it, listing her school counseling appointments. When they were gone, I stood there for a long moment, then walked outside. I didn't take the paper. I wasn't about to stoop to that level, but I memorized the date of the next appointment. The following week, I went to the school office on that day, not to interfere, but to be present. When Lily came out of the counselor's office, she saw me in the hallway, and her eyes lit up. "Grandpa, what are you doing here?" "I was nearby," I said with a smile. "Thought I'd wave hello." The counselor stepped out behind her, and for a moment, our eyes met. There was something in her expression, a flicker of understanding, and she nodded slightly. That nod told me everything I needed to know. The school was on my side. That evening, I had another conversation with my lawyer friend. This time, we talked specifics. Petitions, affidavits, the possibility of court-ordered visitation rights. "You have more than enough documentation now," he said. "If this continues, you can file for formal visitation. And if you can show it's in Lily's best interest, a judge is likely to grant it." For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just reacting to Megan's choices. I had a path forward. I doubled down on my preparations. I updated the binder with everything from the cafe incident to the school visits. I even added photos, not to embarrass Megan, but to show context. Then, just a week before Christmas, Megan called me. "We've decided to let you see Lily on Christmas morning," she said, her tone clipped. "But only for an hour." An hour. After a year of being pushed away, excluded, made the villain, they were going to give me 60 minutes. I thanked her politely, but as soon as I hung up, I felt a quiet determination settle in my chest. This Christmas was going to be different. Not just because I had an hour. Because I had something I hadn't had last year: leverage, evidence, and a plan. As I sat in the garage that night, the lights from the swing set glowing faintly through the frosted window, I pulled the tarp off the toy chest and polished it one last time. Everything was ready. And when Christmas morning came, I wasn't just going to sit quietly and watch things unfold. This time, I was going to make sure everyone saw exactly what I had been seeing for the last year. And once they did, there would be no going back. Christmas morning dawned gray and cold, the kind of sky that looked like it had been dusted with ash. I woke before sunrise and sat in the living room with a cup of coffee, staring at the swing set outside, now coated with a thin layer of frost. It looked still and waiting, like it knew today was the day. I'd laid everything out the night before. The binder, polished and organized, the toy chest, gleaming and ready, and a camera tripod by the front door. I wasn't planning on shouting this time. I wasn't planning on storming in. I was going to let my actions do the talking. At 8:45, I loaded the toy chest into the back of my truck and drove to Megan's house. My wife came with me, her hand on my arm the entire way. "Remember," she said quietly, calm and steady, "you've waited a whole year for this. Don't give them a reason to twist it." I nodded. My heart was hammering, but my mind felt clear. When we pulled into the driveway, Megan's car was already there. I could see shadows moving behind the curtains, hear faint laughter. The scene looked almost identical to last year, except this time, Lily wasn't outside. She was at the window, her little face pressed against the glass. When she saw me, she broke into a smile and waved. I knocked once, firmly. Megan opened the door after a pause, her expression carefully neutral. "You're early," she said. "I didn't want to waste a minute," I replied evenly. I stepped inside, carrying the toy chest between my wife and me. The living room was warm, the tree glowing, wrapping paper already scattered across the floor. Everyone turned to look at us: Megan, my son-in-law, the cousins. The air was thick, like everyone was holding their breath. "Where's Lily?" I asked. "She's in her room," Megan said, crossing her arms. "She can come down when we say so." "No," I said quietly, setting the chest down in the middle of the room. "She can come down now." Something in my tone must have struck a chord, because Megan hesitated before calling up the stairs. Lily came bounding down moments later, her hair a little mussed, still in pajamas. When she saw the toy chest, her face lit up. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I said, crouching down to her level. "This is yours, for you to keep your favorite things safe." Megan started to object, but I held up a hand. "Before anyone says a word," I said, standing slowly, "I have something I need to share." I reached into my coat and pulled out the binder. The room went still. "This," I said, placing it on the coffee table, "is the last year of my life in writing. Dates, times, what I saw, what I heard, and what Lily went through. Megan's face went pale. "Dad, don't interrupt me," I said calmly. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady enough to make everyone stop. "I have tried," I continued, "for months, to handle this quietly, to reason with you, to give you the benefit of the doubt. But what happened last Christmas morning, what has been happening all year, is not parenting. It's not discipline. It's cruelty. And it ends today." I opened the binder and flipped to the first page, reading aloud. December 25th, 7:48 a.m. Found Lily sitting outside in the snow while family opened presents inside. I turned the page, letting the sound of paper fill the silence. April 9th, Lily sent out of dining room for spilling water. Sat alone for 45 minutes while the rest of the family ate. I didn't rush. I let every word sink in. My son-in-law shifted uncomfortably. Megan's face flushed crimson. When I finished, I closed the binder and looked directly at them. "You can say I'm meddling. You can say I'm undermining you. But you can't say I haven't been paying attention. This is what the past year has looked like for Lily. And if it doesn't change, if you continue to treat her this way, I will take this binder to court. I will fight for visitation. I will bring in witnesses. And I will win." The silence after that was deafening. You could hear the hum of the heater and the soft rustle of wrapping paper underfoot. Megan opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Lily stepped forward and put her arms around my waist. "Can I stay here tonight?" she asked softly. That one question hit the room like a hammer. I crouched down again, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That's up to your mom," I said gently. I didn't look at Megan, not yet. I wanted the weight of Lily's words to hang there. Finally, Megan spoke, her voice tight. "You're trying to turn her against us." "No," I said, standing again. "I'm trying to give her a chance to feel safe, to feel wanted, to feel like she belongs in this family. If that feels like an attack, maybe you should ask yourself why." I let that sit for a moment, then stepped back. "You have a choice," I said simply. "We can work together and fix this, or we can let a judge decide what happens next. Either way, I'm done staying quiet." Then I did something that caught everyone off guard. I picked up my coat and turned to leave. "You have until the new year," I said over my shoulder. After that, I filed. The room stayed frozen as I walked out, my wife close behind me. When we got back to the truck, I sat there for a long moment, my hands on the steering wheel, heart still pounding. "Do you think it worked?" my wife asked quietly. I looked back at the house. Through the window, I could see Megan standing still, one hand on the binder, her face unreadable. "I think," I said slowly, "they finally know I'm serious." And as we drove away, I couldn't help but feel a quiet, fierce satisfaction settle over me. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I wasn't just reacting. I was leading, and the next move was theirs. The week between Christmas and New Year's felt like an eternity. Every day, I half expected the phone to ring with Megan screaming, or for a lawyer's letter to show up in my mailbox. Instead, there was silence. A heavy, charged silence. The kind that makes you check the windows just to be sure the world outside hasn't stopped moving. On December 30th, I got the first sign that my message had landed. It came in the form of a text, short, hesitant. "Can we talk?" It was from Megan. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. "Yes," I typed back, but not to fight. She didn't reply right away. When she finally did, it was just a time and a place. Her house, New Year's Eve, 2 p.m. I spent that morning going over the binder again, making sure everything was in order. Not because I planned to shove it in her face again, but because I wanted her to know I wasn't bluffing. When I arrived, Megan was waiting at the kitchen table. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping much. My son-in-law was there too, sitting stiffly, his arms crossed. Lily was upstairs, they told me, playing quietly in her room. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Megan finally said, "I read everything you wrote." Her voice was quieter than I'd expected. "And?" I asked, keeping my own tone even. She hesitated, then said, "It hurt. Seeing it all laid out like that. I didn't think it was that bad. I thought we were doing the right thing, teaching her how to behave. But maybe we went too far." "You didn't just go too far," I said gently. "You crossed the line. Repeatedly. And if something didn't change, she was going to carry that with her for the rest of her life." My son-in-law shifted, looking uncomfortable. "We weren't trying to hurt her," he muttered. "I know," I said. "But intentions don't erase impact. You isolated her. You made her feel like she didn't belong. That has consequences. The room went quiet again. Megan stared down at her hands. I don't want to lose her, she said finally, her voice cracking. Then don't, I said simply. Start making her feel wanted. Loved. Like part of the family, not an outsider. Megan wiped at her eyes, then nodded. What do you want from us? Two things, I said, holding up a finger. First, regular visits. Not just an hour here or there. Consistent time with me and your mom, so she knows she has a safe place. Megan nodded slowly. And the second? Family counseling, I said. All of us. Not just Lily. You too. We need to break this cycle before it does more damage. My son-in-law opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again when he saw Megan's expression. She nodded. Okay, we'll try. I could see how hard it was for her to say it. Not because she didn't care, but because pride had kept her from admitting she needed help for so long. After we talked logistics, weekly dinners, counseling appointments starting in January, I asked if I could see Lily. When she came downstairs and saw me, she ran straight into my arms. Do I get to come over more now? She asked eagerly. Yes, I said, smiling. You do. Her face lit up, and for the first time in months, I felt something loosen in my chest. New Year's Eve passed quietly, but it felt different this year. No tension, no fighting. Just a quiet meal with Lily at the table, drawing pictures on napkins, humming to herself. Over the next few weeks, the changes started small. Megan stayed for dinner instead of scrolling on her phone. My son-in-law began actually playing board games with the kids instead of sitting in front of the TV. And Lily started laughing again. Not the small, nervous laugh I'd heard for months, but full, unrestrained giggles that shook her shoulders and made her eyes shine. One afternoon, after a counseling session, Megan came up to me in the parking lot. You were right, she said simply. I didn't see it. I didn't see what we were doing to her. Thank you for making me see it. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. By spring, the swing set in my backyard wasn't empty anymore. Lily came over every weekend, filling the yard with her laughter, the toy chest in the garage now packed with her books and paints. She had a safe space, a place that was hers. And Megan came over too. Not every time, but enough. Sometimes she even stayed to watch Lily paint, her expression softening as she saw the little girl she'd been too hard on begin to bloom again. One sunny Saturday, as I watched Lily fly down the slide for the 10th time, my wife came to stand beside me. You did it, she said softly. I thought about that for a long moment. Did I? It didn't feel like a victory in the dramatic sense. No gavel in a courtroom, no shouting match where I won. But then Lily came running over and threw her arms around me. Grandpa, she said breathlessly, this is the best day ever. I knelt down and hugged her back, feeling her warm and solid in my arms. And in that moment, I realized this was the victory. Not the binder, not the confrontation, not even the agreement we'd made. The real victory was this: a little girl who no longer had to sit outside on Christmas morning. A little girl who knew, without a doubt, that she was loved. And as I stood there, the spring sun warm on my face, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time: peace. Because this time, there was no storm brewing. This time, we'd finally found our way back to each other.